right. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome. You are live with Trans Northland, and we're back here having what is going to be an amazing conversation. I have no doubt. But before we jump into it, my name is Sean Hayes. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I am a co founder and the executive director here at Trans Northland, which is just been one of the biggest joys of my life to be involved with this organization. And funnily, just a little history. Today's guest, we also have a shared history, and she has also been involved with our organization and getting it to be what it is today. And so, yeah, would you like to introduce yourself, guest?
Danielle Thralow, she, her. Yeah. And
Amazing.
I appreciate what you do. Um, you do, I mean, organizing things like you do is underrated, and thanks for doing it.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, I really love doing it. I've learned over the years, and it has not been just me. It's been so many people
Mhm.
who have helped, including yourself, way back at the beginning. And I know we've had you come and perform at different events of ours in the past. And so I'm just really looking forward to getting to chat more with you. We never get to talk these days, so it'll
That's
be good
true.
to catch up and just let, I think, our viewers, community members, hello, there's some of you watching. Yay, hi, thanks for joining us. I'm just really excited that they can get introduced to you as well, and maybe become new fans. Will increase your audience sizes, all of that.
Well, thanks. Thank you for the opportunity.
Heck yes. Well, thanks for being here. And so, as folks who have been joining us know, we like to start off our first segment with some gender joy, gender euphoria. And so, just those moments that we as trans and gender expansive people feel, throughout our lifetimes, but even throughout our days, whether they're little joys or big gender affirming surgery kind of joys. Now more than ever we need to be looking, I think, for those joyful moments. So yeah, Danielle, do you have anything you want to share that you've been feeling joyful about?
I've been feeling more comfortable in my body than ever. I mean, I'm 62 years old, so it's probably time, you'd think. But I mean, I've actually felt progress in just being more relaxed and also just appreciating just how my body feels. And even when like I tore my meniscus, I do a lot of running and I tore my meniscus. And so I haven't been able to run. But after healing most of the summer, I was able to get out and I was able to do a 4 mile run and a 6 mile run and just, being out the weather today is just gorgeous outside. And this November and late October has been beautiful. And so getting out and breathing the fresh air and just enjoying Duluth, I've been appreciating that, and it feels good to not always be thinking that I have to accomplish something or meet a certain standard, that I could just
Hmm.
kind of exist. It's a new level of comfort. Not all the time, but more than ever.
I love that. I love to hear it. And I, as someone who also, I've come into my own in new ways just in the last year or two of my life. And so I think we're always sort of, I mean, the hope is that we're always gaining that confidence and maybe comfortability within our own body, physical bodies, but also like on the inside, right? And being able to go out and enjoy nature, before it gets too cold. But I feel like I think I've seen pictures of you in the past out running where you
I
maybe have
do. Hmm.
icicles hanging off your face. Is that true?
I measure the Duluth winters by number of hats I have to wear. And so I think the
Layering
record
them.
is 6 hats.
Ooh, and you're still out there, girl.
Yeah.
Man, that is some dedication. So I applaud you on that. And gosh, I think for me, something recently I was just playing with a little bit. because of the time of year. And we just had this super fun, super spooky, fun Halloween party on Halloween last week. And I never really grew up experiencing Halloween like the typical trick or treating. Like we dressed up, I think, as little kids, but then my family was very religious and conservative. And so we would often be at like church, sort of like fall festival type
Yeah, yeah,
event.
yeah.
And
Hmm.
so like dressing up wasn't a thing that I did like from basically like my preteens on. So I've never
Hmm.
really been comfortable or like wanted to get excited about dressing up in costume until just this year where community members were like, "Hey Sean, y'all should do a Halloween party." And I was like, "What? I'd have to dress up then probably." And it's like something as silly as that. Just like I sort of made the decision that I was just going to lean in and do my best and I stole my bestie's birthday theme because I already had an outfit, emo kind of punk rock thing, and so I recycled the costume, but I still like had fun and enjoyed seeing people's reactions to me dressed up, and that's just something new that I hadn't experienced, and getting to do it as like me back in the day, right? When I might have wanted to dress up and actually like have that style that wouldn't have been allowed like in my family and in my home. And so getting to, I don't know,
Hmm.
explore that now, even as I'm 38 years old, like first Halloween I've dressed up in, I mean, that was joyful for me. And now I think I'm hooked for like ever now because everyone wants us to do more Halloween parties. So I might be dressing up every year now, which could be fun. And actually, that reminds me, what did you go as for Halloween, Danielle?
I was Wonder Woman this year, and
Yes,
and it went
yes,
well. It went
I
well.
love it.
Uh, there's pictures on my Facebook feed, and there might be one on my Instagram. And
Oh my goodness. Well, I will see if I can find that because I think I did see, and you looked amazing. I mean, as always, you are
it
super
turned out.
fashionable.
It turned
It
out,
turned
and I wasn't going to do that at first, but my girlfriend's even more into Halloween than I am, which
oh,
is I appreciate that energy, and so she picked the Wonder Woman costume, and it was the right choice. She picked my Maleficent costume last year, and I won a costume contest, so there was a lot of pressure. And then this year turned out well, and so now next year there's even more pressure, and I'm not sure. I mean, it's hard. I feel like Heidi Klum. You have to top it every year, but yet that's it's a bit of work to put together a good costume.
it
But once
is.
once yeah, once I had it, I went out every night last week. I performed 3 times, and plus then I went to at least 2 parties, so that's like 5 times. It was a lot. Yeah.
That's a lot. Yeah. And I just tried to throw it up on there and it didn't work.
Oh,
There it is.
look at
Look
you.
at this.
Yeah.
This is fantastic, Danielle. Like, if I had a sign with 10 on it, I'd be holding it up right now. 10 out of 10. Oh, I love that.
Yeah, the picture in front is unaltered, but the background was
Yeah.
a little bit of artistic license.
I was going to say superhero. That is what you are. I love that. Well, yeah, speaking of, I mean, events, I know there were a ton of events last weekend with Halloween, and we always like to take a minute to highlight what is something that I really enjoyed doing. Part of my job is looking around and finding different kinds of events that are happening here in our Northland community. And we have curated this events calendar that lives on our website. And so we throw, of course, all of our events, support groups, things that we have going on there. But then anything, whether it's a drag performance or, an art event, a queer skating club, like there's so many cool things that happen here in our community that like I don't even always know about. And so you can go and check out our events calendar from our website, which I'll throw up our little website ticker thing there. But coming up, for us,
Look at you. This is better than CNN.
ah, I know, I love
You're
it. I
popping up graphics on the side. You've got tickers on the bottom. Pretty soon we're going to see the S&P numbers here.
We're gonna go live to someone on scene, and
Yes.
I gotta say, I really love it. I really do enjoy it. It brings me
You
a lot of
are,
joy.
yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, so for Trans Northland, at least coming up, for a lot of folks may know, November is Trans Awareness Month. Um, and I think that probably grew from the fact that every November 20th, we honor Trans Day of Remembrance every year. So a lot of folks are probably familiar with that, but that's a day when communities across our country, across the world, come together and we honor all of our lost trans, gender expansive, non binary siblings who have been murdered in the last year. Um, and so it's not really, I don't think, any of our favorite days to gather, but we do every year have a street side candlelight vigil that will be happening again this year on Thursday, November 20th. So I just want to put that blurb out into folks' brains right now. And if you've ever been to that vigil, we usually have, there are photos of people that we can have found, and Kathy Herms is a person in our community who has basically put that vigil together for the last, gosh, I mean, 10 plus years, longer than I think Trans Northland has even been around. And so it's a really beautiful time to come together and to honor those people and just to be together in community on kind of a hard day. And there's actually a lot of joy that comes from that gathering in community, even on a sad, hard day. So keep an eye out. We'll be putting information out about that event, and then we're also trying to plan a community meal. So that may be related to Trans Day of Remembrance, but also, we've got Thanksgiving and holidays coming up. So we just thought it might be fun to throw a just fun potlucky kind of feeling meal. So more to come about that. And then, yes, so check out, we've got an amazing event that I'm going to get to in just a minute here that features our incredible guest. But also just want to highlight that UWS's annual drag show is happening this Saturday, featuring beloved queens of the area, that Queer Issa and Dixie Diamond. So go over, support students, support our youth, who have worked hard to put that drag show together over at UWS. And then next Saturday, 2025 Hot Dish Bake Off event is happening. So if you've heard of that one or maybe not, that is supporting our local We Health Clinic, abortion provider. They also
Is that the
provide
15th? November
it,
15th?
let me double check because I want to get that date right.
So
Um,
November 20th, that's a Thursday. That's the Trans Day of
yep,
Remembrance. And then,
that is right.
yeah. And then
20,
Thanksgiving is a week later after that, I think. Or
ooh, it
wait,
might be the
yeah.
22nd. Okay, so we're going to get back to you on that. But Hot Dish Bake
Mhm.
Up is coming up. Actually, one of our board members, Cam, is going to be one of the judges. So that's always a fun event and a great way to support We Health, who, is one of, I think, the only abortion providers in our whole region, I think. And then they also provide so much gender affirming care, safe sex, all sorts of things. They are wonderful folks. So go eat some hot dish and support their work. And last but not least, and I'm going to turn it over to you to chat a little bit more about this one, but let me see if I can get it up there. Ha! We've got the Beaver Moon Music and Comedy Extravaganza. Tell us more about that, Danielle.
It is an extravaganza, and I get to headline the one of the comedy portion. There's three comedians: Emily Rock, Comrade Tripp, and myself. I'll go up on stage. I think it's at 7:30. I wrote that down. Yeah, 7:30. So the whole thing starts at 5, and there's the bands. and then comedy. So it's music and comedy. It's like a variety show, but try to get there as early as you can and stay as late as you can. Uh, the bands are excellent, and the comedy is excellent. If you don't like me, Comrade's funny and Emily's funny. And then there's going to be Beaver jokes. And how can you go wrong with Beaver jokes?
I don't think you can.
No. My mom called me. This is a true story. My mom called me. She lives on a little pond and she said, Danielle, have I told you that I have a beaver? I'm like, well, mom, I didn't want to assume. And she's like, yes, I have a beaver and it's a problem. It keeps dragging sticks into the yard. Oh, okay. And chewing on them. Okay. Thanks,
Oh
mom.
man. Like, are we
And
getting
my mom is
a little
85 years
teaser?
old. And so, yeah, when I mean, some people, when you're that old, that's just cute.
Right? That's so cute. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So go if you're looking for something amazingly funny, you want to laugh and just be in good community with folks. Go to
And so,
Wussow's.
yeah, so that's at Wussow's out in West Duluth, just off of I think the Central Avenue exit there, the Grand Avenue
Yeah.
exit.
Yep, and they're right next to Zenith Bookstore, who has also
Yep.
been an incredible supporter of Trans Northland and our work in the past
Mhm.
too, and currently. That's a fun little area right there in West Duluth,
It
I think.
is.
I love it. Well,
And I'll be
I hope I'm
headlining a
able
show
to.
in Bayfield too. If you have anybody in Bayfield on November 22nd, I'll be at the Honest Dog bookstore, which they have a stage in their bookstore, which is wonderful. And so I'll be headlining a show out there in Bayfield.
That is amazing. Yeah, you're a busy gal. We're going to hear more about that very soon. And so, where I was going to say too, and we can maybe say this at the end, but is there a good place where folks can kind of follow you and like, know when you have shows coming up? Should they just like friend request you on Facebook or what's the best way to find you?
Yeah, I will always post it on my Facebook feed, and I'm pretty good at posting it on Instagram. And if you want to send me a Facebook message with your email address, I can put you on a email list. But some people don't like that. If you don't want to do that, I'll post the posters like the one you just showed um,
Yep.
in my
Nice.
Facebook feed.
I know. And I try to find them and share them when I see them
Mhm.
too and add them onto our calendar. So that's
I
another
appreciate that you
good
do that.
place.
That's a lot of work for you to do that.
It well, hey, it takes a click of a button to click share, and
And
that's
I've
an
seen
easy thing
you're
we
pretty
can
good
all
at
do.
you're pretty good at clicking those buttons because
I
you're into the special effects there. I see it.
That's right, man. I wish I need to bring up some more. Oh, here, I'm gonna pop it up. Bam, because we're gonna jump into our conversation a little deeper here. So fancy graphic question at the bottom. So,
Uh-huh.
Danielle, how long have you been living here in the Northland and what brought you here?
Well, Northland, that's kind of a relative term. I mean, yeah, I was born in Illinois in 1964, and some people think Illinois is north. And then I moved to St. Joseph, Minnesota in 1967, 1968. My parents moved there with me. I was probably like 3 years old. And then I lived on a farm in central Minnesota until 1982. And then that's when I graduated from high school. And then I was off. I left home immediately. I left the farm as soon as I turned 18. But I went to North Dakota. That's pretty Northland,
Oh,
North Dakota. So I lived in North Dakota until 1992. And then in 1992, I moved to Duluth. And so I've been living in Duluth since 1992. And I love it. I've lived everywhere I've lived. I mean, I loved living on the farm, but it was so much work. And I could just, I felt it was time I had a conservative family as well. They were wonderful. I mean, they provided good food. We had shelter. I got an education. But, back in the 1980s and the 1970s, transgender as a word didn't even exist. And so I was ready to head off to college. I just didn't realize. But the beautiful thing about the University of North Dakota is that it was very inexpensive, so I
Mm,
didn't graduate with much. My student loans when I graduated was about $12,000,
oof,
because
man.
University of North Dakota was very inexpensive. So I was fortunate in that aspect. And then, you know, so you think going to the university, and then they give you a free counseling, right? You get a free counselor if you ever want to go visit the counselor. And I remember visiting the counselor in 1983 or 1984 and telling them that I felt like I was, there was no word for it. So because the word transgender didn't exist until like the early 90s. And so I was just describing that I felt like a woman, and they said, "Don't ever tell anybody." That's what my counselor said. You keep that to
Wow,
yourself.
that's wild.
So that's how college was. And then
Man,
yeah. But so I moved
goodness.
to what brought me to Duluth in 1992 was, I had started a business in North Dakota, and I opened another store in Duluth. I had a store in Grand Forks and a store in Minneapolis, and I opened another store in Duluth in 1992.
Okay, yes, because I was trying to remember, because you and I met. I think, was it the first time we met? Was that night that the couple of us were there at the Building for Women back in 2015, and we were like, we got to keep this group going. What are we gonna do? I swear, I have this like image of like sitting at a conference table, and you were maybe at like the head of the table or somewhere over here. I'm not sure. Do you remember that night? I'm curious.
I do. I don't. I try to usually avoid the heads of the table because that's when you get assigned the role of leading the whole group. But I do remember meeting there, and it was important to me at that time because it just showed that you. I mean, the internet had started to exist by 2015. So, and the word transgender started to exist, way before then. But still, the ability to meet people face to face was rare for me at that time, and that provided that opportunity.
Yeah, certainly. And I know for me at that point in my journey, it was like I was brand new out as
Hmm.
trans, and I'm like, I need to find other folks who know what they're doing, or, at least just have some
Hmm.
sense of community of like, I'm not the
For
only trans
sure.
person in this
Hmm.
town, right? And it was such a relief to meet, I think, that night. And just, I mean, I think there were like 7 or 8 of us maybe in the
Hmm.
room. And we were just like,
A surprising number.
yeah, right.
Hmm.
I think at that point I had met one person who was trans, who was Natalie Crowley, who I believe
Oh
you also
yes,
knew.
Natalie. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you stayed in touch with Natalie, but like right around that time, I think she was getting ready to move to the Twin Cities, and I think had been sort of doing a lot of the group maybe facilitation before. And so it just seemed like a serendipitous time that we all met that night and said, yeah, this is important. We got to keep this going. And now here we are 10 years later as an organization, trying to continue growing and expanding and just providing what community needs right now, especially at this really weird time in history that we're living through. So then, okay, well, you mentioned the business aspect. Could you talk a little bit about that? Like, I don't think I even really know, because when I was reading a little bit about you, it was like you had founded several businesses, and then sort of, I don't know if you were like, I don't really want to do the businesswoman thing anymore, or how did that all happen?
Well, that's so when I was I've always known. I mean, my earliest memories are that I was transgender, even when there wasn't a word for it, and I had always known that back then that it wasn't something that was good. It was always portrayed as not good. And and it was such a almost, I mean, it was just so, I needed a way. So in college, I set these goals, and one goal was to figure out how to address this issue or problem that I had, how to cure myself or how to fix myself, and what I was going to be able to do to go out through life. And so I just set these three goals in college, which was to try to cure myself from being transgender, back in 1983, 1982, and to find somebody to love and spend my life with, and then to make enough money that I wouldn't have to worry that people didn't like me, and if I had to live on a deserted island somewhere, which I kind of thought maybe I would, or out in the woods, I thought maybe I'd have to go live out in the woods and just be a hermit. And so I'd have to be able to afford to do that. So those are the three things that are always in my mind. Um, and then I started a business in in 1986. It was a vintage clothing store, and it was kind of started by accident. Um, I won't go too much detail about that part, but so it's a vintage clothing store, and I really didn't know anything about, which is a nice fancy way of saying used clothes. Right? So basically, I had a store with used clothes in it, and I didn't know anything about clothes, and I didn't know anything about vintage clothes, and so that store didn't do very well. I think my first year in business, I did $12,000 in sales, and out of that, I paid myself $1,000, which sounds like okay, you made money, but so I saved $1,000. I didn't pay myself anything. I just put $1,000 in the bank, and I was working another job at the time. I was a DJ, and uh, and so I thought after that first year that making $1,000 a year isn't enough money. I needed to make more money, and I needed to make it faster. So I started investing that money in the futures market. And after a week, I had lost all $1,000. So I thought, but luckily, I had just graduated from the University of North Dakota. This is 1986, and so I was getting these credit card offers, and that they offered cash advances. So I took out cash advances so I could make that money back. And after 3 months, I was $50,000 in debt at 18% interest. And so I knew that making $1,000 a month was going to take me 50 years to pay off that debt, even if I didn't pay the interest. So I just realized that the clothing store wasn't really working, but there were a couple things in the clothing store that were working: sunglasses and postcards. So I got rid of all the clothes, and I closed that location, which was a very bad. It was in the basement of a apartment complex next to a deli, and so the foot traffic was horrible. But so I had a going out of business sale. I raised $500, took that, and I moved it to a mall that I affectionately called the Post Nuclear Plaza. It's called the South Forks Plaza. We call it the Post Nuclear Plaza because half the lights were out and a third of the stores were boarded up. But it was what I could afford. It wasn't the A mall, it wasn't like the Miller Hill Mall. It wasn't even as
Right.
nice as the Holiday Center Mall downtown, but it had better foot traffic. And I got rid of all the clothes, and I just focused on sunglasses and postcards. And sales picked up. I did like $27,000 in sales um, that next year. Still not nearly enough to even make a dent in the credit card debt, just considering having to replace inventory and pay things like rent and insurance. But so I had that store in Grand Forks and slowly just kind of kept plugging away at it. And I had a partner that then opened a store in Minneapolis. And then because of the change in climate in Grand Forks, we had a lot of Canadian customers, and they had stopped coming to our store because the exchange rate was shifting, and also the tax structure was shifting. So where half of our customers were Canadian in Grand Forks, it went down to like 10%. And so sales were declining in Grand Forks. So I was looking for a different place to open another store, and that's how I found Duluth. And so I opened a store on the Holiday Center again because the Miller Hill Mall would not have me because I wasn't good enough. I wasn't, the quality of my store, I just couldn't put enough money to make it look like it needed to look back then. They've gotten a little more accepting now because I think malls are facing a harder time. But back then, malls were like the peak of where you wanted to be. The Mall of America had just opened. But these were all face-to-face transactions, and so I kind of kept growing the business from 1992, 1993, and the challenge back then was measuring marketing and how can I increase my business? And so I would do things like buy billboards or radio ads or TV ads, but you never know if it's working. Sales go up 10%. You think it's because I'm a better salesperson. Do I have more inventory? Was it that billboard I put up? And so I would just keep doing the same things, afraid to upset the secret sauce. But in 1993, I was reading about in PC Magazine, I was reading about this new thing called the World Wide Web, and the article said that not only would you be able to, with the World Wide Web, know how many people were looking at your ad, which back then was a banner ad, but you'd know if they actually interacted with the ad, so you'd know if they clicked on it, so then you'd know if they actually came into your store from that ad. So if each impression was a nickel and it took 10 impressions before somebody came into your virtual store, then to get somebody through your front doors cost 50 cents. And it promised them that not only would you know if they came into your store, you know if they bought something. So if it took 10 people in your store to buy something, then you know your customer acquisition cost is $5. And then if you know that your cost of goods on a pair of Ray-Ban sunglasses is like $35, you sell for 70, so you make a $35 profit, a customer acquisition cost of $5. Now you know, oh, now it's math, it's not magic anymore. And so do more of that. And to me, that was just an amazing concept. But I didn't even own a computer. I just liked reading about them. I couldn't afford a computer. So, so I kept plugging away on 93 and 94, face-to-face transactions, 95, and I'm still deep in debt. I still haven't paid off a penny of the principal. I've just been making these little interest payments on the credit card, and I'd be getting calls from collection agents all the time. And that's how I learned how to deal with debt and debt collectors. And finally I learned that under the Fair Credit and Collection Act that you can just tell people they have to stop calling you. You send them a letter, you say, you can't call me anymore. And I said, I don't have any money. Stop trying to get money from me. I'll send you money when I have it. You don't need to call me and threaten me with lawsuits. And I said, but you can send me as many letters as you want, and I'll send you money whenever I get it. And so that's kind of how I plugged away through 95 and 96. And then in end of 1996, I was sitting in the store in Duluth, and a guy walks in, and I had been buying ads from him on something called faxes. Have you ever heard of faxes? Ever heard of a fax? FAX? You've never?
Oh yeah,
Yes.
yes, fax machines.
Yeah,
I'm familiar with
fax
that.
machines. Yeah, so there was this thing called FaxNet, and he would fax coupons. It was like junk fax. So if you'd be sitting in your office in the U.S. Bank building or Wells Fargo, and the fax machine would kick up, and then a coupon would come out of the fax machine. It would be from me, but I had been paying this guy to do it. So he'd mass fax all these businesses. The coupon would pop out. People would take those coupons. They'd come into the store, 20% off a pair of sunglasses. I could keep the coupon. I would count it, and I knew that his faxes were working for me because they were driving customers into my store. So I liked that, and I was doing business with him. One day he comes in and he says, I want to try this new thing. I'd like to make you a web page. I said, oh, I read about that once. I'm interested. He said, well, I'll make you a web page and it'll be $500. And I said, I can't afford $500. I don't have $500. I can give you 100. And he said, sure, I'll do it for 100. So he made me this single web page. It was all text. There was no email. There was no pictures. There was no online ordering. It was just an 800 number. But that web page that he put up in November of 1996, in December of 1996, the phone rang on the wall, and I picked it up, and the guy at the other end of the phone goes, how much is your Ray-Ban round metal? And I said, oh, they're $112. And he said, that's a good deal. I'll take it. I said, okay, let me give you directions to the Holiday Center Mall here in Duluth. And he's like, what do you mean? I live in New York. Can't you ship it to me? I'm like, oh, you must have been staying in the Holiday Inn and visited my store. Sure, I could ship it. He said, I don't even know where Duluth is. I found you on the internet. And so in my head, I'm thinking, oh, this is fraud. But one thing I've learned is that you have to go through the motions sometimes, like you were saying earlier, you fake it till you make it kind of thing. Um, and so I grabbed a piece of paper because I didn't have a computer, and I wrote down his name and address, and I wrote down his credit card number because I couldn't process his credit card while I was talking to him because I only had one phone line. So I had to hang up and process the credit card. So after I hung up, I keyed in his credit card number, and I thought it's going to be fraud, but it came up approved. So now I had to actually ship him the sunglasses. So I dug a box out of the garbage. I packaged it up. I walked to the post office, which was in the Snyder drugstore, which was downtown back in 1996. And I mailed off that package to New York. And that was the first sale I made on the internet. And then and then in January of 1997, I sold two pair of sunglasses that way. And January is normally a slow month. And so the idea that I sold two was kind of interesting. And then in February, I sold four, and sales literally kept doubling all the way through May before the light bulb really went on in my head that there probably was something to this internet thing. So I went out and scraped together the money because I started selling things. So I was able to save up a little money. I bought a computer and I taught myself how to make a web page, and built built a web page that that's a whole nother story. But that's kind of how the business started to grow. And in 1997, my sales that year hit a little over $400,000. So I was able to finally pay off those credit cards in 1997. And I mean, the story goes on from there, but that's kind of the beginning, the first 10 years. So the business was started in 1986. I started it, and I was deep in debt for the first 10 years, didn't, just scratching. And then in 1997, so this is an interesting sidelight too, which has also taught me something, is in 1996, I was still, $50,000 in debt. I was sleeping about 1 hour a night. I was afraid to open my bills. The bills would come. I would just put them on the desk. I wouldn't even open them because I couldn't pay them. So I thought, why would I even open them if I can't pay them? And I was seeing lights at night, and I was having heart palpitations. And I went to visit my doctor, and I said, I think I'm having a heart attack. And he said, okay. And he checked me out, and he's like, well, you're not having a heart attack. Have you tried Prozac? And I'm like, okay, I'll try it. And he wrote me a prescription for Prozac, and I went on that for 6 months. And that actually helped me kind of reset my brain. And I was able to start opening those bills and get things organized. And I wouldn't, that didn't really lead to help getting that first web page, but it certainly uh I mean, I was ready to quit. I was ready to go wait tables. And so that time period in there, by getting medical treatment, was important to me. And then that also allowed me to continue. So then I kept growing the company, and with the idea that eventually, this is how it really comes full circle, the idea that eventually I'd be able to afford to get treatment for being transgender, because I couldn't afford it back then. And back then in 1996, I wasn't even sure if I had to be transgender. I thought maybe there was a cure, because
That's
the
right.
research was so young, and I thought, well, maybe someone can just fix me. And so I started driving to the University of Minnesota, where they had the Human Sexuality uh, Research Center, and which was pretty much cutting edge for the time. They had Dr. Eli Coleman, I think, back then, who was writing some of the most prominent papers on transgender issues, or gender dysphoria back then,
Hmm.
which is another topic too. Is what is gender dysphoria? I think clearly it's that belief dysphoria is caused by how people treat us sometimes. And so, but so yeah, I would start going to those. I went there. I got counseling, and I was able to afford it thanks to the business. But yeah, and so running the business was sort of a vehicle to be able to deal with the fact that I was transgender. And it was also a way that I was redirecting all of the mental energy and pressure, and distracting myself from from the problem. I mean, it's not a problem, but it is a problem back then when people keep telling you that it's a problem and that you're not, that there's something wrong with you. And so I thought there was something wrong with me. And so I felt like I needed to go fix it. And so it wasn't, it wasn't for many years of counseling and research that you get to that point, realize where you go that um, it's really not my problem. But yeah,
That's right.
anyhow, so that's so the business, I kept building up the business, and then in 2007, I hit a target, and I was just so full of the business. Is a lot of pressure running a business. It's a lot of work running a business, and I was ready to be done with that and really focus on the physical part of my uh, change. Um, I've been dealing with the mental part for so long, and I had already been taking some anti-androgens by the mid 1990s. But I needed to start telling people. I'd still kept it secret from everybody except my doctor and my spouse at the time knew. Um, so it was time for me, I thought, to tell the world and really just hit it head on. And that was one of the reasons I sold the business.
Hmm. Wow. And how did that go? Like when you made that decision, like I'm fully going to,
Oh,
step in and explore this with my gender identity. What was it like for you?
it wasn't easy.
Relatable.
It wasn't easy. Oh, it wasn't easy. um, I thought it, I knew it was going to be hard, right? I knew it was going to be hard, but it was so much harder than I expected. And
Mm,
the reactions I got were so much more painful than I expected. And that led to 5 more years of just spinning my wheels and not moving the physical part of my transition forward. It was very stuck because I had so many issues to deal with people, other
mm,
people. And so it wasn't until 2012 that I was actually able to so from 2007, which I thought is when I'd be able to finally address it. And wi- and I mean, you can go into more detail of how that worked out, but then it took 5 years. It literally took 5 years before we got to 2012. And then I started telling my people like my mom and my family and my closest friends. So I hadn't even told my closest friends until
mm.
2012. And I will say that there was a bit of euphoria and relief in being able to just start telling people. And even though people still saw me as a male and treated me that way, uh, just knowing that I could talk about it and that I just didn't have that secret anymore. It was not a secret. And so I didn't keep the secret from anybody after that. Everybody knew after that. And then I started getting on stage in 2013 and talking about it. And that, that's very freeing and it reduces a lot of anxiety. I mean, and it creates other anxieties, but overall, it was a net positive.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for sharing that because I think anyone out there who is trans and or, even if they're exploring, their gender in a deeper way, I mean, I think we all can relate to that where it's like there's the fear of how are people going to react and how can I do this and, so many questions. Um, but I think the place that we're at in human history right now, though it can feel really dark and scary in a lot of ways, there is so much more visible support out there for people. And the more trans people I talk to and hear their stories, more of them have supportive, affirming family members, spouses,
For
people in
sure.
their lives
Hmm.
who are not cutting them out or disowning them. And I'm hearing less stories of that. Of course, it still happens, but just looking at sort of that big picture of how far we have come as a society um, is maybe
Yeah,
a
I
good
mean,
reminder for me.
in 1970, 1980, 1990, I mean, I lived those 30 years, those 3 decades, and uh, it was not good. it was it's we've taken a step back since Obama left office and since Biden left office, but we haven't stepped nearly as far back as we were. So far, it's still 10 steps forward, 2 steps back, is how I would kind of look at it.
I agree. And yeah, and I'm just like looking at our time. I'm like, holy crap, we're almost out of time. And so I got to throw up our next question. And you kind of did mention this, but you go from being this amazing, incredible, hustling businesswoman, and then now you're a comedian. How did this happen? How did you
Yeah,
start
and
doing this?
let
And
me
what
add
does that
too that running a business as a closeted transgender person actually was an asset because it led me to consider that everybody who I spoke to that I would hire or anybody that I was dealing with in the business world, that they all had something. Everybody had, it just really reinforced that I needed to be more, that I needed to be kinder and give people more the benefit of the doubt and realize that everybody has a talent and we just need to find that in the people. And I think being transgender led me to that, allowed me to hire people who were um, underestimated by other people. And that helped me grow the business, and it created a business that was a lot like a family. And then, so then, after I started telling people I was transgender out loud in the public in 2012, um, I I went, I started, I decided to do. So I started to do comedy at first when I was sitting at a funeral. I had thought of a joke.
interesting?
I thought of a joke while I was sitting in the funeral, and I thought, I can't tell this joke here at this funeral. The only way I'll be able to tell this joke is on stage. And I thought, I'll never get on stage. I don't want to get on stage. That's terrifying. And then the minute I said that to myself, I thought, well, now you have to get on stage because um, I think that it's important to do things that scares us as long as it doesn't kill me. I know, skydiving would scare me, but I don't feel a need to do that because to me that's dangerous. But getting on stage, you can only die figuratively, not actually. and, and so I thought, well, it's important for me to get on stage to just because I'm so terrified by it. And next, it's important for me to get on stage because I could be a hermit. I love just being home alone and not going out in public. And so doing comedy forces me to interact with people, and that's a good way to stave off dementia, I've read. Oh, so that's one of the reasons I do comedy. But then the real reason, I mean, the number one reason is that when you're trying, when people have made up their minds about something politically or philosophically, the only way that I've found that you can change a person's mind or at least let them consider a different way of thinking, even just the possibility that there might be another option than what they've always believed, is either you're their trusted advisor, and then to be a trusted advisor you have to be their friend for a decade and given them good advice in the past, and then if you say, you know what, the sky isn't actually green, it's blue, you might consider it, they think, oh well, you've been my trusted advisor, I will consider that maybe the sky is blue. The other way to help change people's minds is to make them laugh. When people laugh, it jostles the neurons and certain parts of the brain, and it makes them open to new ways of thinking and new novel ideas. Because the way people treat novelty is very unique, and people meeting me for the first time, I'm a very novel experience for people. And when people have a novel experience, their reaction can be very unpredictable. Some people laugh, some people cry, some people run away, and some people get violent. And so,
Hmm.
um, if I'm telling people I'm transgender, or if they're figuring out I'm transgender, and I'm not sure how they're going to react, well, it helps a lot if they're laughing. So if I can win their trust over with some silly jokes uh, before we start talking about the transgender issues in my set, they've gotten to a point now where they trust me a little bit more. They're having a good time, and their brain is more easily to willing to accept something new that they're not used to. And so
Mhm.
that's the so so doing comedy is sort of a way of brainwashing people into not being into accepting transgender people more easily.
I love that you said brainwashing, because just as a little side note, whenever we've done like Trans 101 trainings in the past, there's always like a slideshow and there's a welcome. And then the next page is usually like your agenda for like your talk or whatever. And I always say the trans agenda. And I feel like this is maybe what our trans agenda needs to shift more into, like utilizing comedy and art in these ways that, as you're saying, kind of open people up. Maybe even if it's like a cracked open door, I mean, it's
That's
like
the
there's
trick. Yeah.
possibility.
Even a crack, even a crack.
And so it sounds like, and I've been to some of your shows, but for folks who maybe haven't seen you, can you kind of talk about like what your sets are like? You mentioned, that you maybe talk about trans issues in them. Like, how does
Oh,
that
for
go
sure.
over?
And I've also tried to go into some of the most conservative areas of the United States. I mean, I've been to Central Florida, I've been to northern Minnesota, I've been to Alaska. I try to go places that the crowd is um, perhaps less likely to have had experience with transgender humans, and so yeah, so I've been to those places, and I've never had a problem yet.
Mm.
I mean, the biggest issue I got heckled pretty hard in Immokalee, Florida, but eventually they came around. And I did get some help from the other comedians in that one. But eventually the crowd came around, and that was the toughest one. And that was early. I'd only been doing comedy for a couple of years at that point. And since then, going into places in the most conservative parts of Minnesota, whether it's southern Minnesota in the rural areas or northern Minnesota in the rural areas, I've always so far been able to get them to laugh. And once you get them to laugh, it's pretty much, so I'll start off with easy, simple, easy to digest jokes, and then we'll get maybe a little darker, a little more complicated, and then we'll do the gender reveal, so to speak. And I I tie that. I mean, maybe they figured it out, maybe
I
they
love it.
haven't. I never know if they figure it out
Yeah.
in advance or not, so I just never assume. And so then you do the reveal, and then that I transition that into sillier material that's very not threatening and more self depreciating. And then we slowly work into the political aspects of it that are also more layered underneath. And so that people can just laugh at the superficial stuff if they want. But I think underneath you also get a little message. That's my ideal joke, has a couple layers to it. And if if it reveals something personal about myself and they learn something personal about themselves at the same time, that's a win.
Yes. Oh
And
my
laugh.
goodness. Yes. Oh my gosh. Well, I love that you've shared this with not only me, but folks who are watching this too, because I think, folks like me who just like turn on a stand-up comedy show, you're not thinking about the behind the scenes of how that person is kind of crafting this whole set, right? And like, I love how you sort of described it's like you're easing folks in, you're making it feel safe, right? For folks who might already have their heckles up, who might be like, oh no, I didn't know there was a trans comedian, or whatever it is, right? It's like, sort of like easing them, settling them in to get to a place where they might actually hear and think, oh, now I've met, I don't know if they would say that,
And
but
that's,
I've talked
yeah, for
with, I've
sure.
heard a trans person speak, and wait a minute, they actually are humans just like me, and maybe they should have equal rights just like every human on this planet,
Yeah, and I
So
think
just
that's an
stepping
important
up.
concept is that a lot of people say, "Oh, I've never met a transgender person." What they don't realize is they just didn't realize they met a transgender person. They meet transgender people constantly. So, but when I get up on stage, and then they know they've met a transgender person. They've been in the same room with a transgender person and they didn't die.
Did you
And
die? But did you
yeah,
die? No.
yeah. So they're in the same room with a transgender person. They didn't die. They actually maybe even had a good time. And so hopefully then when they're back home with their friends who are making silly jokes that are even jokes, they're inappropriate. Maybe they'll just think in their head, or maybe they'll say something out loud, or even if they're, whether in the voting booth or just listening to a politician, they might think of it in another critical way and just think,
Yes,
why are people so worked up about this? I was in a room with a transgender person once and we had a good time and nobody got hurt.
that's right. And we had a good time. Like,
We had a
imagine
good
that.
time. Mhm.
Oh my gosh. Well, holy crap. Our time is wrapping up, Danielle, already.
Well, this has
And I
been a
just,
good time.
this has
Thank
been
you.
so lovely. And now I'm thinking about it. I'm like, dang, I should have asked you to like tell us a joke. And now I'm like putting you on the spot. So I don't know if you have anything that you were like, if there's a minute, I could, or like a little teaser for Saturday's show or anything like that as we're wrapping up.
Well, I'm going to make the assumption that the people watching this are probably more prepared for me to go a little darker quicker or a little deeper quicker. And the other thing I'll say is that I've also been trying to be a little more optimistic in my humor and a little less cynical. And so, like, everybody knows about that. Um, our government recently had an executive order that passports for transgender people are supposed to reflect what the initial birth certificate said. And so, so they mailed me my new passport and they changed my gender marker from F to M. And, I know why they did that. It's because they want to make sure that there's no confusion that I might be a DEI hire. Yeah, I'm not.
That's
I'm not. According to the United States government, I'm a privileged white male.
that's right. Oh my gosh.
And when they sent me the passport, I got a 20% raise.
Oh my gosh. I love it. I love it. And the optimistic part of that, it feels like I don't know about you or anyone watching, but some days, more days than not, it feels harder than ever, I think, to hold on to optimism and to hold on to hope and joy and laughter. And so I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, Danielle, thank you so much for taking the time to come on here and chat with me and just share more of your story. And I think more about how you see the world. And I mean, underneath all of this, I feel like you are an advocate. You are a community social justice warrior, and you're doing it through comedy. You're doing it through, the relationships you have in your life with people. And I just really want to say thank you for the work that you're doing. And like, you're moving the dial that much more. Every person who meets you, who hears you, and that gives me a lot of hope. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you for the work you do. Because this whole thing, it wouldn't happen without you. Thanks for doing it. And
Yeah.
come to Wussow's this Saturday.
There it is. Yep. Let me get some banners off so you can see all the details. Wussow's, November the 8th, 5 p.m. is when it's starting, but it sounds like it's just going to go all night and just be a extravaganza.
It is an extravaganza. Yeah.
Let's do it. So hopefully we'll see you out there at Wussow's. Thank you again so much for all of you who've joined us today while we've been live, or if you're watching this after the fact. Thank you for supporting us and the work we do here at Trans Northland, which, as always, our mission here at the core is to provide support, resources, and connection to the trans community. And that's everybody within that, right? All underneath the umbrella, all the different amazing, beautiful identities. And we're so grateful to have such a beautiful, continually growing community here in the Northland of all of us. So thanks for being a part of it, Danielle, and to all of you out there too. And yep, I can't tease our next guest yet for 2 weeks from today, but I'm very excited. So join us 2 weeks from today. We'll be back live, and we will connect with all of you then. Until
Thank you.
then, take good care, y'all.